There's a moment that changes everything. It's not dramatic. There's no slamming doors or heated arguments. It's quiet, almost invisible. You simply stop showing up the way you used to. You stop answering every call, stop solving every crisis, stop being the emotional furniture in someone else's life. And then something fascinating happens. Something Carl Jung would have recognized immediately. The people who barely noticed you when you were there suddenly can't stop thinking about you when you're gone. But here's what most people don't understand about this phenomenon. Their reaction has nothing to do with love, and everything to do with losing their psychological support system. You see, Jung discovered something profound about human psychology. Most people don't actually see you. They see a reflection of what they need you to be. And when you walk away, you don't just remove yourself from their life. You shatter the illusion they've been living in. Think about it. How many relationships in your life exist because you've become someone's emotional regulator? The friend who only calls during crises. The family member who expects you to absorb their chaos. The partner who takes your emotional labor for granted. You've become what Jung called a vessel for their disowned parts. The parts of themselves they refuse to face. When you finally step back, something primal is triggered. Not love, not genuine loss, but terror. The terror of being left alone with themselves. This is why walking away often provokes such intense reactions. Anger, blame, character assassination. They'll rewrite the entire history of your relationship to cast you as the villain. Why? Because your absence forces them to confront something they've spent years avoiding. Who are they when they can't use you as their emotional dumping ground? Let me tell you about Marcus. For 15 years, he was the go-to person in his friend group, the one who mediated conflicts, offered his couch during breakups, lent money that was never repaid. Marcus thought this made him valuable, loved, essential. But what he didn't realize was that he had become what psychologists call the emotional caretaker. His friends weren't connecting with Marcus the person. They were connecting with Marcus the function. When Marcus finally recognized this pattern and started setting boundaries, the response was swift and brutal. Friends who had leaned on him for years suddenly called him selfish. They questioned his loyalty, his character, his heart. But here's the crucial insight. They weren't mourning the loss of Marcus. They were mourning the loss of their unpaid therapist, their emotional safety net, their go-to solution for problems they didn't want to solve themselves. This is the shadow side of human nature that Jung wrote about extensively. Most people are unconscious of their own emotional needs and project them onto others. When you serve this function in their life, you become invisible as an individual. You exist only as a role, and when you refuse to play that role anymore, their shadow emerges. The needy, dependent, unhealed parts of themselves that they've been hiding behind your caretaking. But here's where this gets really interesting. Your decision to walk away isn't just about them. It's about your own shadow material. The part of you that learned early in life that love was conditional, that you had to earn affection through service, through being useful, through making yourself indispensable. Walking away forces you to confront this too. Who are you when you're not needed? What is your worth when it's not tied to your usefulness? Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are, separate from the roles others have projected onto you. But individuation requires something most people find terrifying. It requires disappointing others. It requires being misunderstood. It requires choosing your authentic self over their comfort. Consider Sarah, who spent 20 years being her family's emotional buffer. Every holiday, every family crisis, every conflict was filtered through Sarah. She absorbed the tension, smoothed over the rough edges, kept everyone comfortable. Sarah never asked for this role, but she accepted it because it made her feel needed, important, loved. What Sarah didn't realize was that her family's stability was built on her instability. Their peace came at the cost of her inner turmoil. When Sarah finally stopped mediating, stopped absorbing their conflicts, stopped being their emotional shock absorber, her family didn't celebrate her boundary. They panicked. They called her selfish, ungrateful, cold. They couldn't understand why she was abandoning them. But Sarah wasn't abandoning anyone. She was finally choosing herself. This is the paradox Jung understood so well. The people who call you selfish for leaving are often the same people who were being selfish by expecting you to stay in a role that was slowly destroying you. They wanted you to remain their emotional support system while offering no support in return. They wanted you to be endlessly available for their needs while remaining blind to yours. When you walk away, you trigger what Jung called the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to create something new by bringing unconscious material into consciousness. Your absence becomes a mirror that reflects back to them their own dependency, their own unhealed wounds, their own responsibility for their emotional well-being. But here's what makes this process so powerful. You're not just walking away from them. You're walking away from a version of yourself that was never truly you. The version that said yes when you meant no, that gave when you were empty, that stayed when every fiber of your being wanted to leave. You're dismantling the false self that kept everyone else comfortable while slowly suffocating your true self. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But becoming who you truly are requires letting go of who you've been pretending to be. And that pretense often served others more than it served you. When you stop pretending, when you stop performing, when you stop being who they need you to be, and start being who you actually are, everything changes. The guilt you feel isn't really guilt, it's grief. Grief for the years you spent being someone else's solution while neglecting your own problems. Grief for the dreams you deferred because their crisis was always more urgent. Grief for the boundaries you never set because their comfort was always more important than your well-being. But underneath that grief is something revolutionary. Relief. The relief of finally choosing yourself. The relief of finally saying, "This isn't working for me anymore." The relief of finally honoring the voice that's been whispering, then speaking, then shouting, "You deserve better," for longer than you care to admit. This relief is your soul welcoming you home. It's your authentic self celebrating the end of a performance that was never sustainable. It's the recognition that you were never too much. You were just in places that made you feel small. You were never too sensitive. You were just around people who were emotionally unavailable. You were never too needy. You were just giving to people who were incapable of giving back. But here's where the real transformation begins. Walking away is only the first step. The second step is learning to stay away from dynamics that require you to abandon yourself. The third step is building a life that doesn't require you to dim your light to make others comfortable. This is where Jung's concept of psychological development becomes crucial. When you do your inner work, when you integrate your shadow, when you reclaim your projections, you change the entire energy you bring to relationships. You stop being a magnet for people who want to use you and start attracting people who want to know you. You stop settling for crumbs of attention and start expecting full, emotional meals. You stop confusing being needed with being loved. Think about Rachel, who realized that every relationship in her life followed the same pattern. She gave endlessly, supported unconditionally, and received very little in return. When Rachel started setting boundaries, she lost some friends, but what she gained was immeasurable: self-respect, the knowledge that she could trust herself to protect her own well-being, the understanding that her worth wasn't contingent on her availability. And gradually, Rachel began attracting different people who were interested in her thoughts, not just her support, people who could hold space for her struggles, not just dump their problems on her, people who saw her as a complete human being with her own needs, dreams, and limitations, not just a function to be performed. This is what Jung meant when he talked about the importance of psychological development. When you heal your own patterns, when you learn to love yourself enough to protect yourself, you change the entire dynamic of your relationships. You stop being an emotional dumping ground and start being an equal participant in genuine connection. But this transformation requires you to let go of old stories. The story that says your worth comes from what you do for others. The story that says love means enduring pain without complaint. The story that says setting boundaries makes you a bad person. These stories served a purpose once. They helped you survive in environments where being yourself wasn't safe. But now they're keeping you from thriving in relationships where being yourself is not only safe, it's required. The people who get angry when you walk away reveal something crucial about themselves. They weren't angry because they loved you. They were angry because they lost their emotional supply, their unpaid therapist, their 24/7 support system, and the people who support your boundary setting, who celebrate your self-care, who encourage you to put yourself first. They're the ones who actually see your worth beyond what you can provide. In the quiet that follows walking away, there's a sacred kind of homecoming. You come home to yourself. You remember that you were never the problem. You were just trying to solve everyone else's problems while neglecting your own. You realize that the approval you were seeking from others was always meant to come from within. The love you were chasing in unhealthy relationships was always meant to start with self-love. This is the gift of walking away. It forces you to discover who you are when you're not performing for anyone else's comfort. It strips away the false identities and reveals the authentic self that's been waiting underneath all along. And that self, your true self, is worthy of love, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Jung taught us that the shadow holds all the parts we disown. Sometimes your departure is the only mirror left for others to face their own shadow. Your walking away might be the greatest gift you give them, the opportunity to discover who they are when they can't use you as an emotional crutch. But more importantly, it's the greatest gift you give yourself, the opportunity to discover who you are when you're not sacrificing yourself for everyone else's comfort. This journey isn't about becoming selfish. It's about becoming whole. It's about learning that self-love isn't the absence of love for others. It's the foundation that makes genuine love possible. When you love yourself enough to walk away from what diminishes you, you create space for what nourishes you. When you respect yourself enough to say no to what drains you, you preserve energy for what fulfills you. Your authenticity becomes a magnet for authentic connection. Your boundaries become invitations for respectful relationships. Your self-love becomes the standard for how others should love you. And in this space of genuine self-respect, something magical happens. You start attracting love that doesn't require you to dim your light. Love that celebrates your boundaries rather than testing them. Love that sees your whole self and chooses you anyway. So, if you've walked away and the world called you cold or cruel or heartless, know this: you weren't abandoning anyone. You were returning to yourself. Your absence may have shaken their world, but it was the first time your presence began to nourish your own. You're not cruel. You're conscious. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not selfish. You're sovereign. And that changes everything. The path of individuation, of becoming who you truly are, isn't easy. It requires you to disappoint people, to be misunderstood, to choose your own healing over their comfort. But it's the only path that leads to authentic freedom. And on the other side of that freedom, you'll find what Jung promised was possible: a life where you don't have to choose between being yourself and being loved. A life where your authenticity attracts the kind of love that doesn't require you to abandon your soul. That's the life waiting for you, not because you walked away from them, but because you walked toward yourself. And that journey home, that sacred return to who you've always been, beneath the roles and the masks and the performance, that's the most important journey you'll ever take.